I'm Joshua Hanlon in front of the Lochnagar mine crater. On July 1st, 1916, a massive explosion ripped through the ground and air here at 7:28 a.m. in the opening minutes of the Battle of the Somme. There were 60,000 pounds of explosives that erupted here and left a hole 330 feet wide and 100 feet deep. Now with the crater behind me, we're going to walk towards the British lines to talk a little bit more about the process of tunneling that the British went through to be able to achieve this massive explosion under the German lines. So the tunnel they dug was roughly about 50 feet deep underground, and they dug it from their trenches, which would have been out there, which is all just farm field around here today, but during the war would have been multiple lines of trenches and highly defensive areas. So as I mentioned, the trench would have been about 50 feet underground. It would have been about 4.5 feet tall and about 2.5 feet wide in this area. So if you picture, the height and size of an average soldier, that isn't very large. So they would not have had a lot of space to move around and work with. At the beginning, they would have used things like pickaxes to dig the tunnel, but then as they got closer to the enemy, as the British would have gotten closer to the Germans, they obviously had to be silent, or else the Germans would have known they were tunneling underneath and would have dug counter tunnels and been able to stop them. So they started using just bayonets with handles on them, and they would just pick apart the dirt, and then another man would actually catch the rocks before they hit the ground. So the goal was to stay as silent as possible so that the Germans cannot predict where the British were tunneling from and stop them. So this was very difficult work done by the British tunneling teams, and they did 19 different mines, so there was a lot of this work going on just in the lead up to the Battle of the Somme. So now let's dive into the strategic importance of why the mine was set off here at the beginning of the Battle of the Somme. We'll take a look at this map here that's really helpful in understanding what was going on in the battle. So the green side here is the German lines and the red are the British lines. And you can see the location of the mine crater right there. So the reason this is important is because of this little jut out from the German lines there. So this thick line running all around here would have been the main German frontline trench. So that little jut out there would have meant that soldiers in that trench could shoot flanking fire at the British soldiers as they moved against the main frontline German trench. So the reason the crater was set off where it was to take out that extending area and take away that advantage from the Germans. Now this was actually one of 19 mines set like this along the German lines leading up to the Battle of the Somme. And they were set off in the minutes right before the men went over the top. So the German, or the British men, were advancing at 7:30 in the morning on July 1st. The Lochnagar crater here was set off at 7:28 a.m. So it was just minutes before the men advanced to create maximum amount of confusion, which it did. All the Germans in this area here were thrown into total confusion. Any that survived obviously were not going to be in decent fighting shape to stop and advance. And the crater itself was actually taken, so that was one of the objectives that the British had in a day that was full of a lot of British failures to take objectives. They took the crater, but the flanks on either side were actually driven back, and those attacks were defeated. So the crater was the only thing that was actually taken as the objective there. But that just gives a little more of an idea of what the British were trying to achieve by setting off this massive explosion underneath the German lines. In 1978, Richard Dunning actually bought the property where the crater sits and turned it into a private holding and memorial for the soldiers that fought in the Somme and here at the crater explosion. So there's a large cross here with a lot of poppy wreaths, which have become a way of remembering many of the soldiers that fought and died in World War I. There's an excellent walkway all around the top rim of the crater, and so it's really nice to be able to just walk around and see it from all different sides and experience what it's like today. It actually is much more sloped on the inside than it was when the explosion first went off, as it's kind of gradually worn in over time and more dirt and soil has fallen in the hole, then it's more sloped now. It used to be much steeper. One of the most interesting aspects of visiting the crater is all of these stories that surround it on all the sides here. So they have these placards and they tell the stories of many of the different soldiers and their friends and families that were present here. So this one that really caught my eye, I thought was super interesting, was Second Lieutenant Cecil Arthur Lewis. And he was actually the co-founder of both the BBC and ITV. And he was a pilot on that day sent to observe the massive mine explosions that were taking place here. So I just want to read a quote from him about watching them explode. He said that the whole earth heaved and flashed, a tremendous and magnificent column rose up into the sky. There was an ear-splitting roar, drowning all the guns, flinging the machine sideways in the repercussing air like a scrap of paper in a gale. So that just gives an idea of what it was like to witness this, and someone who was flying in an airplane. He said that the dirt went roughly 4,000 feet up in the air. So it was just absolutely incredible, the force of this explosion. And reading these stories really helps you connect with what happened here. If you want to visit the crater, there's a small garden with lots of memorial benches around to be able to relax during your visit. There's lots of free parking as well, and it's very easy to reach if you're in the Somme battlefield area. So they make it very easy to come out here and experience the crater and see what it looks like. If you're visiting the battlefield area, it's certainly worth stopping here, along with all of the other excellent memorials and cemeteries in the area as part of the Somme battlefield experience. Thanks for watching.